do that for about $500. But this is a clear sign that they're not selling the types of tickets that they wanted to be selling, that Prince Harry doesn't attract the audience that they assumed he was going to attract.
Many people who follow Prince Harry know him as someone who speaks openly on big stages, but not every event he attends goes as planned, and sometimes the reaction from the public is very different from what was expected. Now, a new situation is gaining attention after reports claim that Harry appeared at a speaking event tied to a $50,000 fee, but the crowd turnout was far from what organizers had hoped for. So what really happened at this event? Why did a high-priced appearance end up drawing so little attention? But do you think this situation is being blown out of proportion, or is it a clear sign of a bigger problem with his public image and speaking events? Let us know what you think in the comments. And to stay updated with more stories like this, make sure you subscribe. The truth behind Harry's Melbourne events. There is a growing claim that King Charles, along with Harry and Meghan, is willing to do whatever it takes to weaken the monarchy, and that this situation is being allowed to continue. At the same time, Harry has been pushing for extremely high speaking fees, reportedly aiming for about $1 million per speech. That number was bold and attention-grabbing, the kind that quickly makes headlines and sparks curiosity. But when you look at what is happening now, especially in Melbourne this week, the situation appears very different. Despite all the publicity and promotion, ticket sales are slow, and the venue does not look full. In fact, many seats remain empty, which raises questions about what is really going on. The excitement that was expected does not seem to match reality, and people are beginning to notice the gap. After stepping away from the royal family, Harry was said to be demanding around $1 million for each speaking appearance. Now, that expectation appears unrealistic. Based on recent events, it seems that organizers and audiences are no longer willing to pay such a high amount, especially given the content of his speeches, which some feel lack depth and substance. There are also reports that Meghan Markle has struggled to sell even 300 tickets for certain events. Meanwhile, Harry is currently in Australia, taking part in what his team describes as a major speaking tour. The main event is a workplace mental health summit in Melbourne. On paper, it sounds impressive, with a large venue, a 2-day schedule, and a professional audience. Everything appears well organized and polished at first glance. However, when you look more closely, the numbers tell a different story. Ticket prices have not just been reduced slightly, they have dropped significantly. They started at about $2,400, then were lowered to $2,000, then cut again to $1,000, and now online access is being offered for around $500. That means the price has been reduced 4 different times for the same event centered on one main speaker. Despite all these price cuts, ticket sales still appear weak. This suggests that the demand is not as strong as expected. At the same time, Harry is being presented as someone who can speak on mental health topics. However, critics argue that he is not a trained mental health professional. They question whether someone who has openly discussed personal struggles, including drug use in his memoir, should be positioned as an expert in this field. Some critics also point out concerns about his professional track record, including difficulties in maintaining long-term staff. This raises further doubts about his authority to speak on workplace mental health issues. At the center of all this is the original $1 million figure. That was the reported goal for his speaking engagements when he first entered this space. It created a strong public image, but it was never firmly confirmed or denied. Now, when compared to the Melbourne event, where reports suggest he may be earning closer to $50,000, the difference is striking. That is a drop of about 95% in just a few years. Even with these lower fees and reduced ticket prices, the event still struggles to attract a full audience. This makes the gap between the original image and the current reality more obvious. What was once presented as a high-value speaking career now appears much less certain. Originally, the Melbourne Summit was planned as a 2-day event, with tickets priced near $2,400, along with another tier at $2,000. Later, A new option was introduced at $1,000 for in-person attendance and about $500 for online streaming. These changes suggest that organizers are trying different strategies to boost attendance, but the results have not fully met expectations. Observers like Kinsey Schofield have openly stated that Harry is not attracting the large crowds his team anticipated. This is not just speculation, as the ticket sales themselves reflect this reality. The numbers clearly show a lack of strong demand. A previous event in Washington already hinted at this pattern. Tickets there were priced around $1,800, and expectations were very high. People attended expecting to hear insightful and meaningful content. However, feedback from attendees suggested disappointment. Some described the experience as confusing, saying there was no deep research, no clear solutions, and no strong data. Instead, they felt they were hearing mostly personal opinions. Now, the Melbourne event appears to be following the same pattern seen earlier. This does not seem like a one-time issue or bad timing. Instead, it is starting to look like a consistent trend. The original strategy was to present Harry as a high-value speaker, placing him alongside respected global leaders and experts. However, such positioning requires strong authority, deep knowledge, and unique insights that audiences cannot easily find elsewhere. However, without those qualities, it becomes difficult to justify high prices or maintain strong interest, and that challenge is becoming more visible with each event. Is the content really worth the price? Did the audience get what they expected? Let's find out. Expectation collision with reality. At this point, the pattern has become so clear that many people can already predict how each event will unfold. It feels almost scripted, repeating itself over and over again, and audiences are beginning to notice the similarities. There was a time when expectations were high, when people believed that a speech by Prince Harry would be a major attraction. Now, however, the situation looks very different. For one particular event, it was reported that he was being paid about $50,000 for a single speech. Even that amount, which is still a large sum, did not guarantee a strong turnout. Ticket sales reportedly struggled from the very beginning. Organizers found themselves lowering prices again and again, trying to bring more people into the venue. Despite these efforts, the room was said to remain only partially filled. In some cases, it appeared that tickets were being offered at extremely reduced rates, almost as if they were being given away, simply to avoid the awkward image of a half-empty auditorium. When the moment finally arrives and he steps onto the stage, microphone in hand, the audience expects something meaningful. People come in hoping to hear valuable ideas, practical advice, or expert knowledge they can take back into their own lives. Instead, what they often hear is something much more personal. The focus tends to shift toward his own experiences and stories. While personal stories can be powerful, the audience is often left feeling that something is missing. They came for insight and depth, but what they receive feels closer to a personal reflection than a structured professional talk. This difference between expectation and reality has had a noticeable effect. Over time, it has influenced how much event organizers are willing to pay. At one point, there were claims that speaking fees could reach as high as $1 million. That figure represented a certain level of demand and prestige. Now, seeing the fee drop to $50,000 tells a very different story. This is not a small adjustment or a minor correction. It represents a sharp and significant decline. If you look closely, the numbers tell their own story. Moving from $1 million down to $50,000 is a drop of about 95%. That is a dramatic change by any standard. It suggests that the original expectations were far higher than what the current situation can support. Some people have started to describe this as a $1 million gap, a simple way of explaining the difference between what was once believed and what is actually happening now. Another point that continues to draw attention is the issue of audience appeal. The expectation was that his name alone would attract large crowds wherever he went. However, reports suggest that this has not always been the case. In several locations, the demand has not matched the predictions. This has led to questions about whether the overall image, often associated with both Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, is influencing public interest in a negative way. Some critics argue that the brand they represent carries a level of controversy that affects how people respond to their appearances. What makes the situation even more striking is that even at the reduced fee of $50,000, ticket sales still appear to face difficulties. Normally, lowering the price of an event makes it more accessible and increases demand. In this case, that expected effect does not seem to fully happen. This creates a gap between what is being offered and what people are willing to pay, raising further questions about the true level of interest behind the scenes. Then there is another layer to the story that many people find hard to ignore. During these speaking events, topics such as workplace mental health and well-being are often discussed. These are serious and important subjects that affect many people. However, reports have suggested that since 2020, around 25 staff members have left operations connected to him. While staff changes can happen for many reasons, the number itself has caught attention. Each event adds another piece to that picture, and with every repetition, more people begin to recognize the pattern. If people are paying for expert knowledge but leave with something different, what exactly are organizers promising when they arrange these events? Who is this message really meant to reach? Let's find out. Growing disconnect between Harry and the audience. The reaction from the audience was hard to ignore. Tickets had been priced at $1,800 for a single seat, which immediately created a sense of high expectations. People didn't walk into the event casually. They came in believing they were about to experience something meaningful, something worth every dollar they had spent. There was an assumption that the content would be rich, carefully prepared, and filled with valuable insight. Many expected well-researched ideas, clear direction, and practical takeaways they could use in their own lives or work. But as the event unfolded, that expectation began to fade. Based on how people responded afterward, it became clear that what was delivered did not match what had been promised, at least not in spirit. Instead of detailed research or structured guidance, what the audience received felt more like a collection of personal opinions. There was no strong framework, no deep analysis, and no sense that the material had been built on solid data. It came across as informal and unpolished, especially considering the high price people had paid to be there. And this is where things become even more noticeable. This wasn't an isolated situation. It didn't feel like a one-time misstep or an event that simply didn't land well. Instead, it seemed to follow a pattern that had been repeated again and again. Each appearance carried the same structure, or lack of it. There were no deep studies presented, no compelling evidence, and no layered breakdown of complex ideas. The focus stayed heavily on personal experiences every single time. While personal stories can be powerful, relying on them alone, especially in a paid setting like this, began to feel repetitive. As this pattern continued, it started to stand out more clearly. People began to notice the similarities between events, and the repetition made the experience feel predictable. Some even described the events as dull, saying it became difficult to stay engaged. The effort to sell tickets began to feel disconnected from what was actually being offered. It created a sense that something wasn't quite lining up. At the same time, another situation added even more attention to the overall picture. While one side was struggling to fill seats at speaking events, reports suggested that Meghan was focusing on a completely different type of venture. She was said to be preparing to launch a private members club location in Australia, connected to Soho House. This kind of club is known for its exclusivity. It operates through applications, selective entry, and a strong emphasis on status and connections. The contrast between these two directions was difficult to ignore. On one hand, there were public speaking events with partially filled rooms and mixed reactions. On the other hand, there was a move toward an elite, invitation-based environment. It raised questions for many observers. After stepping away from one of the most well-known and structured institutions in the world, they now seem to be building a connection with a different kind of exclusive circle. People noticed this shift quickly, and it became a topic of discussion. Despite these efforts, the overall strategy did not appear to be producing the results that might have been expected. It wasn't just a recent issue either. For a long time, there had been signs that things were not working as planned. Yet the same approaches kept being repeated, almost as if trying again would eventually fix the problem. The idea seemed to be that persistence alone would turn things around, but the outcome suggested otherwise. The change in direction, from global speaking stages to private club ventures, became more and more obvious. And as this shift continued, people began watching more closely, trying to understand what it all meant and where it was leading. Then the situation took on an even deeper layer. It was no longer just about ticket prices or how many seats were filled. It became about perception. The image that had once been carefully presented to the public no longer fully matched what people were actually seeing. There had been a time when the message was clear and strong. The idea was to position themselves as high-value speakers, appearing alongside global leaders and offering unique insights that audiences couldn't find anywhere else. That was the promise that drew people in. There were even expectations of large crowds, with some believing that barriers and crowd control might be needed due to high demand. But reality told a different story. Instead of overwhelming attendance, turnout appeared more modest, and the reactions from those who did attend were not always positive. While some feedback was mild, others were more direct, expressing disappointment or confusion about what they had just experienced. As time went on, these reactions became louder and more frequent. Event after event, similar feedback kept emerging. People would arrive expecting depth, structure, and clear guidance, only to leave questioning whether they had received any of those things. Some comments were especially blunt, with attendees saying things like, "That wasn't what I expected," or asking, "Where was the actual advice?" These kinds of statements carried weight, and once they started spreading, they were difficult to contain. In the world of public speaking, reputation moves quickly, much faster than any advertising campaign or promotional effort. A single disappointing event can usually be overlooked, explained away as an off day. But when the same experience repeats itself, it begins to form a pattern. And patterns are much harder to ignore. Event organizers start to take notice. Audiences become more cautious. Instead of rushing to buy tickets, people begin to wait, to watch, and to listen to what others are saying. That sense of urgency that once supported high ticket prices slowly starts to fade. Bit by bit, the excitement is replaced by hesitation, and the gap between expectation and reality becomes more visible with each passing event. Was this truly the step forward they had planned, or simply what remained after everything else unraveled? Let's take a closer look. Changing expectations around high-profile speaking events. Harry appeared on stage in Washington, D.C., and complained about how he has had no privacy since he was born. He did not offer any real solutions or practical ideas. Instead, it felt like another emotional outburst for the audience to sit through. Many people in the audience were disappointed, especially considering they had paid around $1,800 for tickets. Some felt the experience did not match the cost and were unhappy with what they received. A bigger concern being raised is credibility. When someone is seen as an expert or authority, people expect useful information and real value they can apply. Without that, the trust begins to weaken. Right now, that trust seems to be fading. Events are still being booked, but the excitement around them is dropping. There is less enthusiasm and more doubt, and people are becoming more cautious about attending. This shift can already be felt. Some critics even suggest that people should think carefully before spending large amounts of money on these events, arguing that the value may not match the price. This situation is no longer just about one speech in one city. It is about whether the interest and influence behind these appearances are growing or slowly fading. If the pattern continues, it may not only lead to smaller audiences or lower fees, but also raise a deeper question about whether these events will continue to matter in the future. At the same time, there are reports that Meghan Markle may be involved in quietly expanding business activities, including a possible Soho House project, according to media sources like the Daily Mail. A comparison is also being made with Catherine, Princess of Wales. Her early years' work is based on research, data collection, published studies, and publicly shared findings. When she speaks, her presentations are structured, focused, and backed by clear information that people can use. The work itself is the message, not personal storytelling. In contrast, recent events in places like Melbourne have been described as high-cost appearances, with ticket prices reportedly reduced but still not filling venues. One approach is built on research and clear public value, while the other is seen as relying more on presence and personal image. The gap between these two styles is becoming more noticeable with each new event. So, has anyone come forward to clear the air? Or are the audience kept in absolute silence? Let's find out. The shocking silence. There has been no clear reply or explanation to any of this. No one has explained why ticket prices keep dropping again and again. There is also no clear preview of what people are actually getting for the money they are still being asked to pay. That silence is becoming very noticeable. There has also been no strong response to the criticism. No attempt to correct the story or explain what is going on. Just silence. And that stands out even more when you remember how quickly this same team used to respond in the past when there was pressure or negative attention. In the past, statements were released quickly, responses were firm, and criticism was handled almost immediately. But now, when it comes to pricing, attendance, and how the audience is reacting, there is nothing. At this point, the silence is starting to say more than any official statement could. The original idea was presented in a bold way. It promised to move away from the usual path, do more, reach a wider audience, and create something bigger and more impactful. That was the clear promise people were given at the beginning. But now, things look very different. Some venues are not full. There is no clear explanation of expertise being offered from the start, and ticket prices have been reduced multiple times. Expectations that once went as high as $1 million have now dropped to only a small fraction of that. This kind of change does not go unnoticed, and it affects how people see the entire project. The platform still exists, but people are increasingly questioning its value. At the same time, there are reports of other appearances and exclusive events happening elsewhere. This adds another layer to the situation. The same public figure still has visibility, but the public reaction feels very different now. What once began with very high expectations is now moving toward uncertainty, and people are watching closely. A good example of how projects can still generate interest despite mixed reactions can be seen in Catherine's earlier work, where research outputs are sometimes shared publicly and receive attention. However, the situation is still developing. But whatever happens when the next audience arrives, whether large or small, it is unlikely to go unnoticed. Reactions spread quickly, and every moment becomes important. What experience did the audience really get? Were they satisfied? Let's find out. The power of audience reaction. People are showing up with different kinds of expectations. Some arrive with real questions they want answered. Others come with doubts, already unsure about what they're about to hear. And a lot of people are simply reacting to everything they've heard before, building their expectations from past comments, opinions, and experiences. There are also different moods in the audience. Some are genuinely curious and open-minded. Some are skeptical, watching closely to see if anything meaningful will actually be delivered. And others are waiting for a clear sign, something that proves this whole experience is finally moving in a better direction. Because at this point, this moment matters a lot. If the message connects properly, if the content actually feels useful, and if the audience walks away feeling like they gained something real, then everything around the situation can change quickly. One strong and effective performance has the power to shift public opinion, rebuild interest, and bring back lost attention. Sometimes just one moment like that is enough to change how everything is seen. But the opposite is also true. If the same issues happen again, that becomes a serious problem. If people leave the event feeling like they didn't get what they paid for or expected, that disappointment doesn't stay quiet. It spreads. In today's world, reactions travel fast. A single negative comment can quickly turn into 10 more. Those 10 can become hundreds. Before long, the entire story is no longer controlled by the event itself, but by the reactions people share online. And once that starts, it becomes hard to stop or reshape. At that point, people begin to question things more deeply. They start wondering whether the speaker truly has authority on the topics being discussed. It is no longer about potential or reputation alone. It becomes about actual delivery, what is really shown and said when it matters most. The pressure is high because every word, every idea, and every moment on stage is being carefully observed and remembered. Nothing goes unnoticed. Right now, it feels more like a test of value, a test of trust, and a test of whether the audience still believes there is something worth showing up for. And once the event is over, there is no way to redo it. There is no editing it, no improving it later, and no second chance to fix the impression it leaves behind. What happens during that time becomes the story people carry forward. After that, the focus naturally shifts to what happens next, because that is where the real impact appears. Not in the advertisements, not in the ticket prices, and not even in the media headlines. The real result is seen in what people actually say after leaving. It shows in their conversations as they walk out. It shows in the posts they share online. It shows in the messages and discussions they have with other attendees. That is where the real truth comes out, because people openly compare their experiences and express honest opinions. If they feel satisfied, that positive energy spreads quickly. But if they feel disappointed, that reaction spreads even faster. Right now, that possibility is right in front of everyone, and it is impossible to ignore. In fact, the return events involving Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have already sparked strong reactions, and many people are saying things are not going smoothly at all. Some are even describing it as a complete disaster in terms of public reception, even before things fully unfold. What do you think about the shocking outcome of Harry's speech event? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe.